Hi guys, what's going on? It's Ben here. I am back again today doing another video, and the subject of today's video is going to be slightly different than the videos I've been doing as of late. If you've been keeping up with the videos I've been doing, they've been mostly focused on me breaking down position by position all the best players who are going to be starting next year by centers, power forwards, small forwards, well, so on and so forth. But today I'm going to be switching up just a little bit before I get to my final video on that, which is point guards. Today I'm going to be doing a video more like I used to do a few months ago to a year ago, where I would break down basically why a team who seemed like they were set up to be very successful in their conference and in their playoff run fell short and essentially disappointed with what they were. So today I'll be looking at the 2014 to 15 Dallas Mavericks. This is a team that not a lot of people are going to think about. Not a lot of people, they don't come up in a lot of people's minds first off when they think about teams that had tons of untapped potential. But to me, when I remember this team forming and going to the playoffs, I thought, okay, this team's going to get to the Western Conference Finals and maybe take on the Warriors and not probably go to the finals, but I thought that for sure they could at least get to the Western Conference Finals. Um, and so, frankly, I think that they did fall quite a bit short because they did lose in the first round. Uh, but today I'll be breaking down why I had such high expectations, I think why a lot of people did, and then ultimately why the Mavericks fell short too. So to review, if you're unfamiliar with this team, the main core of this team was Dirk Nowitzki, who was in the last. This was the last year that he was voted into the All-Star game. He was putting up averages of 17 points a night on 46% shooting from the field and 38% from three, and then he was getting 6 rebounds a night as well. Then you had Tyson Chandler at center next to Dirk, who had come back from the Knicks and was back on the Mavs, and he was averaging 10 points a night along with 12 rebounds and 1 block per game, shooting 67% from the field, which is very good for him. Then you had the new addition taken over from the Rockets of Chandler Parsons, who this is the year where he actually played well for the team. He was very injured in 2015 to 16, but in 2014 to 15, he played most all of the year, 66 games out of 82, and he averaged 16 points a night with 5 rebounds, and he shot 46% from the field and 38% from three. So essentially about the same numbers as Dirk, really, which is pretty impressive. And then their best player on this team was Monte Ellis this year, who shot 45% from the field, scoring 19 points per game, had 4 assists a night, and only shot 29% from three, but didn't really take that many threes, so it wasn't a big deal. And this team had a lot of good supporting pieces besides that core four right there. They had off the bench guys like Devin Harris, who was putting in 9 points a night on being a good plug and play guy. JJ Barea, Al Farouk Aminu, Richard Jefferson. Um, they had Charlie Villanueva and Ray Felton. All these guys, none of whom were great off the bench necessarily, but all of them provided just like a good little punch off the bench. But I think the real reasons why I thought this team could be a lot better than what they ended up being was because of their two midseason additions. So first of all, you had the Amari Stoudemire edition. If you're unfamiliar, midseason 2014-15, the Knicks bought out Amari Stoudemire because he wasn't really fitting in with the team anymore, and he signed with the Dallas Mavericks. And in his time with the Mavericks, which was about 25 games before the playoffs started, he only played 16 minutes a night, but he averaged 11 points a game and 4 rebounds, which when you consider he's only playing 16 minutes a night, those are really good averages. And he shot 58% from the field. Just for reference, if you adjust that to playing 36 minutes a night, that means that Amari was averaging 24 points and 8 rebounds if he were to be playing 36 minutes a night. So really good averages. He was basically just the backup for Dirk and Tyson, and he was doing really well at that. Like the perfect backup center slash power forward. And then their big trade at the deadline, which I thought was going to put them over top, and which everybody thought was going to put them over the top, was the acquisition of Rajon Rondo. So basically, midseason they traded Jay Crowder for Rajon Rondo, and they traded one other guy too, but he was not really notable as of today. But They traded Crowder for Rondo, and everyone thought, this is a pretty fair trade. But it was sort of a thing like the Celtics are getting a piece for the future, and the Mavericks are kind of in win now mode. Rondo's a guy who you'd hope could give you like 11 points and 11 assists a night with maybe like 2 steals. In Dallas, he averaged in the remaining half of the season that he played there 46 games for the Mavs. In 28 minutes a night, he averaged 9 points and 7 assists, shooting 44% from the field. So okay numbers, not great for him. 1 steal a night. If you adjust those to per 36 numbers, he was averaging, let's see here. In per 36, he was averaging 12 points and 8 assists a night. So nothing great, but his actual stats were he was averaging 9 and 7, so not great. Definitely disappointing a little bit for what people thought. He fit in okay with this team, but he had sort of gotten into this rut with Boston where over the last couple of years between 2013 to 14 and even 12 to 13, those 2 seasons, he had really been the guy, the number one option to kind of do whatever he wanted, averaging around 13 and 12 for those 2 seasons, like 13 points and then 11 to 12 assists a game. And he always had the ball in his hands and stuff like that. But what he ran into in Dallas was that really he was much lower on the pecking order, sometimes the fourth option for this team. And especially, I think a big thing that impeded him being successful on this 2014 to 15 Mavs team was that Monte Ellis was a ball dominant off guard. So Monte Ellis typically is playing shooting guard, and he really operates best when he can have the ball in his hands and create and distribute the offense his own way. Not a big assist guy, Monte Ellis, but just he scores primarily from dribble, 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 drive, penetrate, or pull up for a jump shot. He doesn't like to do much off-ball stuff, and I think that really messed with Rondo in that when he was in Boston, for a lot of that tenure, he was kind of allowed to create everything and then just distribute it off. Like when they had Ray Allen, he was just a catch and shoot guy. So like his 17 points tonight were coming from basically just Rondo doing everything and then him dishing it off to Ray and getting the jumpers. Or Garnett largely that way too, in that he wouldn't just take the ball, pound it, pound it, pound it in a back down and then do a fadeaway. They would run plays and Rondo would then dish it, and then Garnett would just shoot a midi right away. Uh, Pierce had a little more ISO ball to him, but even he could do a lot of that, come off of a screen, catch and shoot, or Rondo sets up a pick and roll with Garnett or Pierce, or even occasionally like Kendrick Perkins or Big Baby and do that stuff. But in Dallas, there's a lot more of like, okay, Rondo, we want you here. You're a good point guard, but like now Monte Ellis is going to take the ball up the court. And that really just does not jive with Rondo's style. He basically needs to have the ball almost at all times on offense for him to be effective. He doesn't really do much off ball because he's not a good shooter, and he's a very small point guard. He's 6'1", so it's not like he can post up or anything. But his whole thing is like dribble, 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 go under the basket, sink the defenders in, and then kick it out to a guy, or pick and rolls. And they did do a little bit of pick and rolls with him and Tyson Chandler, but Tyson Chandler, he wasn't an amazing pick and roll partner because his offensive game is somewhat limited, and he already was getting a little bit older at this point, and he was focusing more on defense than offense. And Dirk is a decent pick and pop option, but I think Rondo was just really out of his rhythm because he was just handling the ball a lot less frequently. So he wasn't really ready when they would say, "Okay, Rondo, do the pick and roll with Dirk." Then he would be like, "Well, he wasn't really in the flow of the game because he wasn't handling the ball. It would be a lot of Monte." And I think that was one of the biggest issues with this team is that like Rondo would have been a much more impactful presence if he would have been told play like how you like to play, because he was still in his prime at this point. But the fact that they kind of gave him a marginalized role from what he was used to, I think very much impacted his usefulness in their team system. And Rick Carlisle is a great coach, and that's not saying that they should just let Rondo run everything, because I don't think that necessarily would have made them great either. But they need to strike more of a balance, because I feel like they didn't give Rondo much of a leash on this team, whereas he got a pretty big leash with Boston and with the big three and Doc. And I think on this team they sort of said like, no, you're not the best player on this team. You're the fourth best player. Whereas really they should have said, you're better than Chandler Parsons. You can command more of the ball and the attention and the flow of the offense than him, or even Dirk at this point. He should have had a little bit more leniency than Dirk. But that was a big dynamic for them. But either way, they finished with 50 wins in the Western Conference, and they had a solid core of, after the trades and everything and the offseason acquisitions, they had a starting lineup of Rondo, Monte Ellis, Parsons, Dirk, and Tyson, with the primary bench guys being Devin Harris, Richard Jefferson, Al-Farouq Aminu, Amari Stoudemire, and Amari Stoudemire being sort of like the sixth man. So they won 50 games, and this was a West where the standings were not separated by very much. So like the difference between the 2 seed and the 7 seed, which was Dallas and Houston, was a 2 seed. Dallas was a 7 seed. Houston only won 56 games compared to Dallas's 50, but relatively close. I think you had like the 2 seed and like the 6 seed were only separated by like 1 game, because I think like it was like Dallas. Then you had like the Clippers, and um, you had, let's see here, like Portland and Utah, and like maybe not Utah, but San Antonio was in there. You had a lot of teams where they all had like 55, 56 wins, but Dallas is a little below that at 50, but still they were a good team, good record, very good record for a crowded Western Conference. And I think I, like a few other people, thought, hey, you know, they're the 7th seed, but they're about equally as talented as this 56 win Houston team. You know, Houston's got James Harden and Dwight, but this wasn't a great Houston team. They had those two, but then besides that, they had like Jason Terry, they had Corey Brewer, Pat Beverly. Those were like the next guys up. Trevor Ariza, who was a decent player, but besides that, as you can see, like when you have a 40-year-old, essentially like a 37, 38-year-old Jason Terry and Corey Brewer as your next guys on your team, besides Dwight and James Harden, you're not supremely talented or like overpowering. So I think a lot of people reasonably thought, you know, Dallas could win this and go on and go a lot further. But of course, they lost in 5 games, as we all know in retrospect. So in the playoffs, we saw a different dynamic here. Mainly, Rondo had just gotten a big attitude at this point, and it had really bubbled over. And him and Rick Carlisle were getting into visible like feuds on court and on the sidelines during this series. And essentially, after Game 2, Rondo just said, like, "Take me out. I don't want to play anymore." He was so frustrated with Rick Carlisle. So Rondo only ended up playing 2 games in this series. So they had a big void to fill between basically Devin Harris and JJ Barea. JJ Barea stepped in and started, but he's not really a starting caliber guy. He's more of a guy who's effective when he plays like 12 minutes a night rather than 30. But he played 30 minutes a night, shooting admirably, 44%, and averaging 12 points per game. I think the big difference in this series was Chandler Parsons, who fell off a cliff. He was taking 15 shots a night and only making 5 of them. He averaged 33% shooting from the field. His averages went from 16 points and 16 points a night down to 10 from his poor shooting. But you got really good performances out of Monte Ellis and Dirk. Dirk averaging 21 points per game and 10 rebounds, and Monte averaging 26 points per game and 5 assists on actually better shooting during the regular season, going up from 45% to 47%. But what it really came down to was that this Dallas team, outside of Chandler Parsons, they had a really bad defense. Dirk was obviously a very porous defender at this time in his career. Monte Ellis was a very bad defender. Chandler Parsons was average at best. On his best nights, he was an average defender. On his worst nights, he was mediocre to bad. And then without Rondo in the lineup, who is usually a good defender, Devin Harris and JJ Barea, JJ Barea was really the starter at this point, who is a very bad defender. So basically, you had 4 out of your 5 positions at any given time were really bad defenders. Oh yeah, and then let's not forget about Amari Stoudemire, who during the regular season had been putting up averages of 11 and 4, 11 points, 4 rebounds on 58% shooting. He also struggled against the Dwight Howard defense. His shooting plummeted from 58% to 43% when he was consistently going up against an all-NBA caliber defender, and his points averages dropped from 11 down to 8, and his rebounds from 4 to 3. So he struggled definitely with having to be defended by a guy like Dwight and then Omer Asik when he came in the game. Both guys were good defenders. So yeah, this team I think there's a few different reasons why they failed, but if I had to boil it down to, let's say, three, I'll say um, they played no defense really. Let's see here. For the season, I think their defensive rating was fairly awful. Their league rank in defense during the whole season was 20th, but I think in the playoffs it actually dipped quite a bit. Let me see here if we can find that. I can't find it on here, but they're being a 20th ranked defense isn't great for a playoff team when defense really counts a lot more in the playoffs, especially when you're missing arguably your second best to best defender in Rondo for most of the series. That brings me to our second point, which is uh, Rondo was basically just overall had the wrong mind space to be on this team. He was ready to be the best unquestioned number one alpha as he had been in Boston for about 2 years. But here on certain nights he was like the fourth or fifth option, and they didn't really let him play the way he wanted to. He kind of butted heads with Rick Carlisle, and he was told to play a role rather than to play his Rondo style. So I think that's a huge piece of this, is that he was expected to be the piece that put them over the top and make them a Western Conference Finals contender. And basically, he was not a team player while he was there. He let his ego get in the way, and they misused him. And then third of all, I think I could bring up the Chandler Parsons whole thing, that he and Amari Stoudemire really did not perform up to the standards that they had in the regular season, and so they got let down in the playoffs. Parsons shooting 33% for the series, and Amari dropping from 58% in the regular season to only 43% in the postseason made a difference. So those are three reasons why I think that the Mavericks lost, guys. Let me know your thoughts about this team if you remember them. If you had any thoughts regarding this video, feel free to let me know and share. I find this kind of stuff really interesting. I hope you guys do too, and I will see you next time. Bye.